I go by Kristen and recently turned 17. Everything then began to fall apart. I grew up with what I considered to be a reasonably average family. Along with our parents, there was me, my younger brother, 10 years my junior. Dad handled management at Mom's family company, a business my grandpa had started from nothing. It all began with a series of coffee shops that finally developed into a premium coffee selling business. Grandpa really went out to acquire it. He did not, however, sell the company or let it fail when he made his retirement decision. He presented it to Mom, not sure. I recall listening in on the chat. Mom's voice was as plain as day. "I'm glad I'm housewife. Allowed John to deal with it, and thus it was. Dad grabbed control, and life continued." I first began to see the cracks in the basis of our family when I was in my teens. Mom and Dad started bickering increasingly. Mom picked at every small detail Dad did or neglected. She seemed to be trying to challenge him to his limits, therefore inciting him. She would also play the victim when he at last snapped and yelled. She would sob to anybody who would listen, asking, "See how he treats me. I just try to keep this family intact. He yells at me." I knew nothing about what to believe. Although I loved both of my parents, seeing them pull apart was intolerable. Although my brother was too little to grasp what was occurring, every time Mom and Dad would go at it, I could see the uncertainty and terror in his eyes. One evening, things got really tight. Hearing a smash, I was in my room trying to block out their most recent quarrel with music when, as I hurried downstairs to discover a scenario that would fundamentally alter everything, my heart flew. Dad was standing over Mom on the floor, screaming, "He get me!" She said Dad appeared to be in great desperation. "Kristen, I did not touch her." She slumped. I was assisting her in getting upright. Mom, though, was already on the phone phoning the cops. Not sure who to believe or what to do, I stood there paralyzed. I thought my entire world was falling around me at that instant. My memory is clear of the evening Dad was hauled away by the cops. My mind running with questions prevented me from sleeping. What happened exactly? Could Mom be hit by Dad? Why would Mom lie if he hadn't? The next 3 days passed in a haze. Dad was released without charges, and Mom dropped the case in a display of what she defined as generosity. Still, the harm was done. Our house was in intolerable stress. Mom painted Dad as a monster who had been torturing her for years, merciless. "He's always had a temper," Mother would murmur to me while Dad was not around. "From the worst of it, I'd have been shielding Tommy and you." The divorce proceeded more quickly than I could have imagined. Dad was looking lost in his own house, packing a single suitcase one day. With a broken voice, "I'm sorry, kids. I'll fix this. I will promise." But in what way could he? Mom acquired everything from the divorce, the house, the car, even Dad's job status in the company. He found nothing left. Mom set Tommy and me down for a family meeting after Dad left. "Things will be different now," she remarked, flashing a smile that fell short of her sight. "Your father cannot now harm us. We are safe." Young and disoriented, Tommy questioned, "But when is Dad coming home?" Mom's face stiffened momentarily before she faked yet another grin. "Oh, sweetheart, Dad has some time to work on himself. Still, we will be perfectly okay without him." Something seemed off, and I couldn't get rid of that. But Mom would shut me down any time I sought to challenge her account of events. "You're too young to understand, Kristen," she would write dismissively. "Active relationships are complex." Then, just 2 months following the divorce, Mom delivered even another surprise. One evening she said, "Kids, I have great news. I am going to be married." I stood there shocked. Married? But just 2 months have passed. Mom said, "I know it seems fast, but you just know when you meet genuine love. Robert and I, first sight was love." I got sick. How fast could she move on? "And then, Dad, what about us?" "My new stepfather, Robert, arrived in not too long ago. He was all right, I suppose. While he paid little attention to me, Tommy, and he seemed to click, it made me feel even more alone to hear them laughing together and engaging in video game activity. Mom ran the family business in meantime and brought Robert to work with her. Tommy and I disappeared into the background while they were always talking about business, making plans. Between the recollection of what our family used to be and this new reality I couldn't quite embrace, I felt lost. I wondered where I fit in now as I saw Mom and Robert swoon over each other at the dinner table, with Tommy contentedly chatting away. And between Mom and Dad, what actually occurred? Mom delivered another surprise on us just when I felt things could not get any more convoluted. She and Robert had agreed to relocate the head office of the company to another location allegedly more suited for business. They intended to hand all the capital to this new subsidiary. I originally gave it little thought. While moving would be difficult, at least we would be spending time as a family. Mistake. Mom knocked on my door one evening while I worked on homework in my room. "Kristen, honey, you know Robert and I are moving for work?" "Yeah, when would be our leaving date?" Already visualizing arranging my room, I inquired. Mom's face turned into something I cannot quite decipher. "That's the point, honey. Given you're almost finished high school, we reasoned that staying here would be better even though the new house is not particularly large." I thought of myself as having been gutly pounded. Stay right here? But Tommy asks. Tommy's younger friend. Ma answered fast. He needs us more. Besides, would you want to switch schools just before your tests? Staying with your grandfather would be ideal, in our opinion. What I was hearing made me incredulous. They were walking away from me. But Mom, I want to be with Tommy and you. Is there a larger venue we could find? Mom spoke in a sharp voice. "Kristen, this has already been decided upon. It is best. Verify with me." And my universe collapsed once more exactly like that. Mom, Robert, Tommy were gone within a few weeks. I was living with Grandpa. Grandpa's lovely, not wrong. But I felt abandoned, tossed aside, like I didn't fit their new beautiful family. Not too far away was my 18th birthday. I mistakenly, maybe, hoped Mom and Robert would return for it. Not quite, though. Work kept them too busy to make it. Grandpa, bless him, he threw me a party and allowed me bring friends. It was different, but I valued his effort. Grandpa invited me into his home office early the morning following my birthday. He gave me a little folder and looked gravely at me. "Happy birthday, Kristen," he replied, a glimmer in his eye. "This is my present to you now. Now you are of age." Not sure, I opened the folder and began reading the papers within. My jaw dropped at my realization of what I was clutching. "Grandpa, this is—" He nodded with a smile. "That's correct, young man. I am handing you the corporation." I stammered. "Me as well. Managing an entire business at 18. But Grandpa, I have no idea the first thing about running a company." Laughing, "Kristen, you have promise. You carry it. You will grow, and I know you will do fantastic things." Then his expression went solemn once more. "There is still one more thing. You ought to work things out with your father. As a consultant, take him on. He understands the company and, well, I believe there are some things you should hear from him." I faltered. Mom had spoken about Dad, and after all, I wasn't sure I wanted to see him. Grandpa had never, however, guided me wrong before. My tummy in knots as I walked to our table, I met Dad in a little cafe downtown. I saw him rise, a reluctant smile on his face. He seemed older and more depressed than I'd recalled. "Kristen," he murmured, his voice gentle but wary, "I can see why you're furious. Your mother most likely imparted a lot of information about me." "Indeed, she did," I said in a snap. "How did you treat others? Abuse how precisely you strike her. How could Dad—" He drew in a long breath. "Kristen, what your mother told you? That is untrue. You have to pay attention to what actually happened." Dad set out a narrative for the next hour that truly rocked me. He described how Mom had purposefully set him off, pushed his buttons until he was at last at wit's end. She had faked the entire affair the night I saw her on the floor. Your mother took the police statement back in exchange for me not claiming any property in the divorce? Dad replied, his voice laden with grief. She put me in position, Kristen. She got it. She wanted everything. What I was hearing defied belief. But why would Mom do that? And why did you not object as well? Dad dug into his pocket and grabbed his phone. Because of this, he said, running playback on an audio file. Cold and exact, Mom's voice permeated the space between us. John, here's the deal. You calmly go, sign over everything to me, and I will drop the charges. Fight me on this, and I'll see to make sure everyone thinks you are an abuser. Your decision. I started to feel ill. Dad, why did you not present this in front of courts? You might have cleared yourself of guilt. With mournful shaking of his head, Kristen, it would not have changed the result. Your mother had formed her opinion. More significantly, though, I wanted you spared any more suffering. You were juggling quite a lot already. In your adolescent years, you needed help rather than more family strife. Tears began to fill my eyes. Every bit I believed was a lie. I'm so sorry, Dad. I should have realized. I ought to have put faith in you. Dad grabbed across the table and clasped my hand. Sweetheart, it's good. I apologize also. I know from your younger days that you worked too much. I should have visited more. For a minute, we sat in quiet, each trying to weigh all that had been spoken. Then, wiping my eyes, I realized why I had first gotten in touch. Dad, there's something else I have to tell you. I added, my voice faltering but deliberate. Grandpa, he handed me the business for my 18th birthday. Dad's eyes grew wide with surprise, then wrinkled with pride. Kristen, that's amazing. Your grandfather was always quite perceptive in terms of possibilities. He has to see wonderful things in you. At his words, warmth crept across my chest. But, Dad, I have no idea about managing a business, firstly. I need aid. Dad smiled right away without thinking. Helping you free of charge would honor me. I will walk you over all you need to know. I had a range of feelings as we carried on discussing future plans, including anger at Mom for her dishonesty and sadness for what our family had lost, but also hope. With Dad's support and Grandpa's confidence in me, hopefully I could make this unanticipated present remarkable. The months passed while I adjusted to live with Grandpa. I was wearing a cap and gown, honors high school graduate before I knew it. Walking across that stage without Mom, Robert, or Tommy in the audience seemed strange. Still, Grandpa's proud face and Dad's encouraging presence offset it. Graduating behind me, I poured myself into getting ready for college. My grades and extra activities helped me to get a full scholarship. After all, I had a company to operate now, hence I chose to study business management. Grandpa insisted on celebrating somewhat the day I received my admission letter. 2 of us, some cake, and a toast to the future. The doorbell rang just as our second slice was under progress. Grandpa wrinkled his brow. Were you expecting someone? I shook my head, also perplexed. I dropped my plate almost as Grandpa opened the door. Mom and Robert stood there, seemingly proprietors of the space. Mom looked at me hardly at all. Her gaze stayed on Grandpa, her face angry. Dad, we really need chat. Currently. She went straight into the living room, Robert trailing behind, without waiting for an invitation. Startled, I watched her circle Grandpa. Why can't I get into the corporate accounts? She insisted. And who granted your right to stop the capital flow to our new subsidiary? Grandpa kept his ground, his voice cool but strong. Sarah, the business is no longer yours. Now it's Kristen's. Mom's mouth dropped. She appeared for a split second like a fish out of water. Her eyes narrowed then, darting between Grandpa and me. She snipped. What do you mean it's Kristen's? Exactly what I said. Grandpa remarked. For her 18th birthday, I handed Kristen the company. Right now, all choices about its future and budget belong to her. Mom glanced to me, and the amazement on her face soon gave way to a simpering smile. Kristen, sweetheart, I have missed you terribly. Why not you join us, Liv? In the new city, we have settled really nicely. Blinking, surprised by her abrupt change of attitude, she said, We have a wonderful house. Her voice honey-sweet. You have a large bedroom specifically for you with enough of area for a computer and desk. One might work from home and learn. Would that be wonderful? I got a twingle in my chest. I wanted to say yes. Part of me still yearned for my mom's approval. Then, though, I considered all I had acquired here, all I had constructed. Startled by the consistency in my voice, Thanks, Mom, but no, I said, I am content here. My life, my pals, Grandpa, and so forth. In addition, I shortly start college. As I kept my ground despite Mom's machinations, there was obvious tension in the room. Her gentle manner soon changed when she understood I wouldn't be moved. Fine, she said, losing the sweet coating of her voice. We will relocate back here should you not show up. Like previously, every one of us can live in our old house. Surely that would be great, Kristen. I shook my head, experiencing an unusual mixture of despair and will. No, Mom, neither is likely to happen either. Her facade was fast crumbling, and I could see the rage gathering in her eyes. Now or never was the question. My voice firm despite my rushing heart. Mom, I replied, I want you to tell me the truth. Between you and Dad, what happened exactly? Why, therefore, did you actually file for divorce? Mom looked confused for a single second. Tears flooded her eyes then, as if on cue. She wailed, Oh, Kristen, saying, Your father. He was so nasty. He put me down. He even made contact with me. I had to go defend Tommy and you myself. Her falsehood set out a flash of rage in me. Stop it, Mother. I know the truth about this. I understand your framing of Dad. You set him up so you might divorce him and claim all for yourself. Mom's tears disappeared from her eyes quickly, then a frigid wrath I had never seen before took front stage. Hissed, How dare you? You grateful child, you have no right to get involved in my personal life. Rising in voice, she turned to Grandpa. Everything in this place is mine. I choose where and who receives what. Who lives where? She rounded on me once more then. You will come home right now, Kristen, and you will turn that company over to me where it belongs. Startled by the poison in her voice, I stood there until Grandpa moved forward, his face a tempest of resentment and despair. That's plenty, Sarah, he murmured, his voice low but strong. You seem to have overlooked some quite crucial information. This property, including your previous house, belongs to me, not you, and the business which today belongs to Kristen. She owns it. I handed it to her to use as she thinks appropriate. Mom's face turned pale then, scarlet with fury. Grandpa shut off her opening mouth to argue. I have heard enough, he declared with conviction. I am embarrassed of you, Sarah. You were raised better than this. I now believe it's time for Robert and you to head out. You cannot kick us off. Mom shivered. Your daughter is me. Grandpa spoke with a stone quality, and Kristen is the granddaughter of a grandchild who, in the past several months, has demonstrated more honesty and fortitude than in years. Now both of you should depart. Grandpa led Mom and Robert to the door, and I watched a whirl of feelings inside me. Mom closed the door behind them, her face a mask of rage and incredulity. I collapsed into the couch, feeling exhausted as the sound of their automobile engine vanished. Grandpa sat next to me with a consoling arm around my shoulders. I started to wonder what would happen next as we sat there in quiet. Though heated, the conflict with Mom felt as though it was only temporary. This marked only the start of a fresh chapter in our convoluted family history. The morning Mom and Robert left, I woke to the sound of subdued voices downstairs. Curiosity overriding me, I slinked down to discover Grandpa and Dad deep in conversation in the study. Dad said, seeing me first, "Kristen, come in, sweetheart. We were just discussing Tommy and you." I went into the room, clearly perplexed. "What about Tommy?" Grandpa sighed and cleared his mouth. "I've asked your dad whether he would be ready to pursue Tommy's custody." My eyes grew wide. "Absolutely. But just how?" Dad nodded, eyes full with both hope and will. "Your grandfather thinks we have a strong case, especially with what he's discovered." Grandpa went for a big folder from his desk. "Kristen, take a seat. You ought to see something here." I opened the folder, shaking hands. Inside was a thorough private investigator report. Reading made me feel as though my planet was once more tilting on its axis. "Mom was cheating on you," I told Dad, disgusted, "with Robert for years." Dad nodded with a grimace. "It seems so." Grandpa pointed to a number of papers, including old text messages, gift records, hotel receipts. Your mother and Robert had been carrying on an affair long before the divorce. But how did the researcher come upon all this material? Disoriented, I asked. Grandpa's gaze closed. Robert made a very important error. When he acquired a new phone, he tossed his old one. Our researcher found it, and it was a gold mine of material. I grew ill. But why then all the theatrical displays around the divorce? Why would you charge Dad with mistreatment? It was Robert's idea, Grandpa said, his voice low. Based on their messages on that old phone, he advised she frame your father for domestic violence. All of it was a ruse to guarantee she received everything after the divorce. Grandpa wasn't done, even though tears seared my eyes. "There is more," he added, flipping to another part of the report. "That same phone exposed Robert's actual character. He is not the person he says he is. Kristen, he's a con artist. The phone had texts directed to other ladies, targets wealthy women, marries them, then vanishes with their money. The bits came together all at once. That's why he was so eager to move the business and distribute all the capital. I said he intended to steal it all along." Grandpa gave a serious nod. "Precisely. And one more thing you ought to know. When I gave your mother all this proof, she balked to believe it. She is deeply in denial regarding Robert's actual nature and goals." I backed off, my head whirling. "What do we do right now?" "We fight," Dad said with conviction. "For Tommy, for the business, for the truth." Grandpa nodded in accord. I had already given my attorney a call. "We are going to seek Tommy's custody and act to guard the assets of the business." Legal fights and emotional upheaval swept over the next few months. Dad battled nonstop for Tommy's custody, and I supported them at every turn, resolved to bring my younger brother home. Mom was trying to paint Dad as a monster, spewing stories of abuse and neglect, and the courtroom was charged. But within the mass of data we had acquired, her lies fell apart. As our attorney delivered the detective's results, the retrieved phone messages, evidence of Mom's affair, and the complex plan she and Robert had developed to frame Dad, the court listened carefully. The look Mom's face took when the judge granted Dad complete custody will never fade. Shock, resentment, and something else, perhaps the first flash of insight that her carefully created world was disintegrating. Not too long afterward was the last blow. Robert showed his real colors when he realized Mom was now left without the firm, without a house, and saddled with child support obligations. He vanished overnight, fleeing off with another lady and leaving Mom with just the fallout from her behavior. Mom tried to reconcile with Dad in a last-ditch effort, tears running down her cheeks as she pleaded for pardon. I was there when she arrived at our old house once more. Still, Dad stayed strong. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he continued, his voice calm, "but far too much has happened. Once more, I cannot trust you. Kindly go." The door closed on Mom's begging face, and I sensed a chapter of our life closing. Though unpleasant, it also seemed oddly liberating. After that, life found a different beat. Driven to learn everything I could about business management, I poured myself into my college education. I would read over corporate reports with Dad between lectures, learning from his experience. He agreed to operate the business until I graduated so I could pick the ropes free from pressure of complete responsibility. Still too little to completely grasp all that had transpired, Tommy flourished under Dad's care. Seeing them mend their connection and Tommy's eyes sparkle when Dad returned from work or when we all gathered Friday night for board games was heartwarming. Grandpa, who lived a few blocks away, was visited quite a bit. Sunday dinners became into a treasured custom. The four of us sat around his large wood table, laughing and sharing stories. Grandpa would enthrall us with stories from his early years running the business, his eyes glittering as he watched me absorb every detail. Sitting here now in my childhood bedroom, which once again feels like home, I am astounded by how much has changed. Our road here was difficult and agonizing, dotted with betrayals and unpleasant realities, but it also produced a family rebuilt, closer and stronger than ever before. I'm sure difficulties lie ahead. Managing a business is not a little chore, and the echoes of our family drama will probably follow years to come. Still, I am not terrified. Tommy, Grandpa, and Dad at my side help me to feel ready for whatever the future presents.
"You listen to me," he growled. "I took care of Charlotte and the kids. I deserve something from her inheritance. You owe me big time." I couldn't believe his audacity. "Are you out of your mind? You caused her death. You made her neglect her own children, and it was you who gave her the poison that killed her. As far as I'm concerned, you should have died in her place." Before I could even react, he swung at me, landing a hard punch. It hurt, but I was too enraged to care. Fueled by adrenaline, I dodged his next punch and lashed out, hitting him. Over and over again, until people finally pulled us apart. I had a black eye, but I had broken his nose and left a deep scar across his cheek. "Hi, my name is James, and life has been chaotic lately. I really need to get some things off my chest. My family's been through a lot, and it hasn't been easy. Both my parents were alcoholics. While they never hurt my sister, Charlotte, or me, they were constantly violent toward each other. I've done everything I can to avoid going down that same path, but my sister wasn't so lucky. Charlotte's made some questionable choices, especially when it comes to the men in her life. I love my niece and nephew dearly, but their fathers were terrible men. Thankfully, they're not part of the picture anymore, except for the occasional child support payments. I always offered to help Charlotte with the kids. I wanted to be a positive influence in their lives, to give them a chance at something better. And Charlotte was more than happy to take me up on the offer, mostly because it meant free babysitting. I watched the kids while she worked since I worked from home. Sometimes it was just for a weekend, other times a few days. That was until she started dating Arthur. I never liked Arthur. He was abrasive, constantly bragging about his money and how he lived in luxury. But Charlotte fell for him hard. She thought she had finally found her Prince Charming, a man who could give her the lifestyle she always dreamed of. As soon as they got serious, Charlotte started leaving the kids with me for longer periods. At first, it was just a few extra days, but soon it turned into weeks at a time. Don't get me wrong. I loved spending time with my niece and nephew, but it was getting expensive. So, one day, I brought it up with Charlotte. "Hey, Charlotte, I love spending time with the kids, but I was wondering if you could chip in a little from the child support payments. It would help cover the costs of food and clothes." She didn't take it well. "Are you serious? Don't you love your niece and nephew?" "Of course I do," I said. "But watching them for weeks at a time adds up. A little help would go a long way." She sighed and handed me her debit card. Fine. Use this, but only for the kids. Arthur covers all my expenses anyway. I thanked her and made sure to only use it for essentials when she was away. But things started to feel off. After one of her trips with Arthur, she came back looking awful, like they hadn't slept the entire time. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked. "You don't look well." "Yeah, we're fine. Just partied a little too hard," she replied, brushing it off. I wanted to believe her, so I let it go. Then, a few nights later, I got a call at 3 a.m. from my niece. She was only 8. "Uncle James." "Hey, sweetie, what's going on? Why aren't you asleep?" "I'm hungry. Mama won't make me anything to eat." Alarmed, I grabbed some leftovers from my fridge and rushed over to their house. The lights were on, despite the late hour, and the kids were wide awake. They looked disheveled, like they hadn't bathed in days. I gave them the pasta I'd brought, and they devoured it like they hadn't eaten in ages. When I asked when they last ate, they said it was the previous day's lunch. The kids told me they hadn't eaten anything since yesterday's lunch. Furious, but trying to stay calm for their sake, I quietly slipped away while they ate, heading down the hall to find Charlotte. When I reached her room, I found both her and Arthur passed out, completely naked. On the nightstand, a pile of drugs confirmed what I already feared. They had been getting high while neglecting the kids. I quickly checked that Charlotte still had a pulse, then went into action. I packed a bag for my niece and nephew, scooped them up, and took them back to my place. After giving them baths, I made sure they had another meal before tucking them into bed. Later that day, my phone rang. It was Charlotte, and the casual tone of her voice made my blood boil. "Hey, James, are my kids with you?" "Yes," I said coldly. "They're asleep in my spare bedroom." "Oh, good. I must have forgotten you were babysitting this week." "Phew, that's a load off my mind." "Charlotte, I wasn't supposed to be babysitting," I snapped. "Your daughter called me last night because she was starving. When I got to your place, the kids hadn't eaten in almost 24 hours. And why? Because you and Arthur were too high to notice they were hungry, or that they were even there." She bristled on the other end. "Oh, shut up. You don't know what it's like being a mom. You only have them occasionally, but they're my responsibility all the time. It's stressful." I was just blowing off some steam. "That wasn't blowing off steam, Charlotte," I said, my voice rising. "That was self-destruction. Have you learned nothing from the mistakes our parents made?" "Don't you dare lecture me," she spat. "Now give me back my kids." I knew I didn't have a legal right to keep them, so once they woke up, I fed them again, packed their things, and drove them back. When I dropped them off, the tension in the air was palpable. Arthur and Charlotte barely said a word, but the glares they gave me made it clear they were not happy. For the next 2 weeks, I didn't hear a single thing from them. Then, out of nowhere, Charlotte showed up at my door. "Arthur's taking me on a 10-day cruise," she announced flatly. "I need you to watch the kids." The short notice left me scrambling, but I agreed. Before I could say anything more, she left without a word of thanks, leaving the kids standing in my doorway. They seemed upset, so I decided to take them to the zoo. It cheered them up, and by the time we got back, they were laughing and excitedly telling me all about the animals they'd seen. I used Charlotte's debit card to pay for the zoo tickets and dinner, thinking it was only fair considering the surprise visit. Days passed, and I waited for her to come back. I didn't know the exact date of her return, but after 11 days, I started to wonder. When 2 weeks went by with no sign of Charlotte, I began to worry. I called and messaged her constantly, but never got a response. A month later, fed up and concerned, I finally reported her missing to the police. A few hours later, they informed me that she wasn't missing at all. She was at home, inebriated but alive. Furious, I went straight to her house and banged on the door until she answered. She looked disheveled, bleary-eyed, and completely indifferent. "Oh, it's you. What do you want?" Where have you been, Charlotte? I demanded. Do you even remember that you left your kids with me a month ago? She blinked, clearly trying to recall. Oh, right. Where are they again? They're at my place. I've been looking after them for 4 weeks while you've been off God knows where. Yeah. Okay, cool. Listen, I'm tired. I'm going back to bed, she mumbled, slamming the door in my face. Stunned and angry, I left and returned to my apartment to take care of the kids. I didn't know what else to do. A few days later, I got a call from the police. Arthur had reported that Charlotte had overdosed and passed away. I was stunned, speechless. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork and planning. Charlotte had always said she wanted a simple funeral, so we made sure she had a beautiful one. Thankfully, Charlotte had the foresight to make a will. She left everything to me, her house, her belongings, and her finances. Most importantly, she named me the guardian of my niece and nephew, who were understandably devastated by their mother's death. It was heartbreaking to see them go through so much pain, but I was determined to be there for them. Arthur, on the other hand, didn't take the news well. He was furious that he hadn't inherited anything. As it turned out, everything he had claimed about his wealth was a lie. All the trips, the lavish purchases, they had all been on credit. He was drowning in debt and had hoped to use Charlotte's money and property to bail himself out. I didn't care about his problems. In my mind, he was responsible for Charlotte's death, and I wanted him to pay for it. But Arthur had other ideas. You listened to me, he snarled one day. I took care of Charlotte and the kids. I deserve something from her inheritance. You owe me. I couldn't believe the nerve of this man. Are you out of your mind? I shot back. You killed her. You made her neglect her kids, and you gave her the drugs that ended her life. As far as I'm concerned, you should have died instead of her. That's when he swung at me, landing a solid punch. It hurt, but I was so furious that I barely felt it. I dodged his second punch and retaliated, unleashing my anger. I hit him over and over until people finally pulled us apart. I ended up with a black eye, but I had broken his nose and shattered his cheekbone, leaving him with a nasty scar. Arthur tried to press charges, but the police ruled it as self-defense, and I wasn't charged with anything. After that, I never saw him again. Honestly, I wish I hadn't been pulled away from him. I might have killed him if they hadn't stopped me. And in my mind, he would have deserved it. A few months later, I saw Arthur's name in the news. He had been arrested for attempting to smuggle drugs into the country. His plan to make quick money and pay off his debts landed him in prison instead. I felt no sympathy for him. And so, that's my story. It's not a happy one, but there is a silver lining. My niece and nephew are doing well now, and I'm committed to ensuring they live happy, healthy lives. Although the money left in Charlotte's finances wasn't much, I sold her house and used the funds to create a solid education fund for both of them. Their schooling will be paid for, giving them a good start in life. As for Arthur, from what I've heard, he's been in and out of jail and is living in poverty. The last time I saw him, he had lost all of his teeth to his addiction and was living on the streets. As for me, I still carry the guilt of not stepping in sooner, of not saving my sister from Arthur's toxic influence. I don't know if I could have made a difference, but the thought that I might have saved her haunts me. Now, I pour all of my energy into making sure my niece and nephew avoid the same traps. So far, so good. Thanks for watching. If you found this story meaningful, don't forget to subscribe and leave a comment below. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront her. She tried to deny it at first, but when I yelled at her, she was forced to start talking. She burst into tears and went on her knees. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Joe. Forgive me, please. It wasn't intentional. Of course, I was touched by her tears. I couldn't bear to see her crying, but I also needed to know who she cheated on me with and why she did it. When I asked her, she only cried more, her body trembling uncontrollably. "Tell me, who is it?" "It's your brother." It felt like my world stopped for a moment. I couldn't believe my ears. How could Bob be responsible for my wife's pregnancy? I grew up with a selfish brother, a brother who never praised me, but never failed to criticize every little mistake I made, and even took advantage of them. My name is Joe, and I have an elder brother, Bob. Bob was born just 2 years before me, but he boasted about and took advantage of the age gap like it was his life's goal to do so. We went to the same school, and I hated every bit of it. I didn't like the fact that I had to swallow Bob's stupid behaviors at school. He would often come to me with his friends, strangling me and pushing me to the floor roughly in pretense of being playful with me. Bob was just too rough. I couldn't say if he was intentionally extra with me, but I never enjoyed it. Once, I was eating in the school's cafeteria, and he suddenly walked up to me and kicked the table, making my glass of milk fall and pour on the table and my thighs. I was so angry, but I couldn't fight him. We were at school, and it would be embarrassing to fight with my elder brother there, so I kept mute and simply left the cafeteria, ignoring his loud, mocking laughter. When we got home and I confronted him, he blew up. "Are you crazy? You're so ungrateful. I'm 2 years older than you, yet I play around with you like we're age mates, and all you do is complain. You're so immature." I was so annoyed because he blew everything out of proportion. I simply wanted him to reduce how rough he was with me, but he was taking it differently. When I tried to explain, he slapped me. I was shocked. "The next time you're disrespectful to me, it will be more than a slap. You're so foolish and ungrateful." When my parents returned, I reported the case to them. But when Bob was summoned, he began crying. I just wanted to be nice to him. No one talks to him at school. I and my friends play with him so he's not left out. How's that bad? Even though we're older than him, we don't mind playing around with him. How does that make us bad? I couldn't believe my ears. I had friends at school. In fact, most of my friends stopped being close to me because they were afraid of getting beaten up by my brother and his friends. Now, how could I explain that my brother was lying when they were already hugging and petting him? "Joe, apologize to your brother, love. Don't be so mad at him. He's just looking out for you, son. I used to be rough like that with my brothers too. It's just how boys joke around. Don't be mad at your brother, okay?" Did I have any choice? No. I couldn't be seen as a weakling before my parents. I forced myself to take his silly jokes until I finally graduated high school. I'd grown up to be very handsome and manly, but Bob was 2 times better. He got a girlfriend the first year he resumed college. At the time, I was still at home. Whenever my parents were out to work, Bob would bring in different girls to our house. I would try to advise him against doing that, but he never listened. "How dare you tell me what to do? I'm 2 years older than you. You have no right to dictate how I live my life to me." I learned to shut up quickly. One day, a girl came visiting. All 3 of us were in the living room watching TV. I didn't say a word or do anything except watch the TV. Shockingly, we heard the sound of my mom's car, and we all froze. My parents had gone out in my mom's car, and they'd returned. As if planned, Bob quickly got off the couch with the girl, and they rushed to me. He pushed her on me and stood in front of us, speaking to me like I'd committed an offense. When my parents came in to meet the scene, I saw how their faces fell. They seemed to misunderstand what was happening, just as Bob wanted. "You're bringing girls home now, Joe. I'm so disappointed in you." At that moment, seeing my mom's face crushed me. She was even more disappointed. I feel so embarrassed. "Mom, Bob's lying. I didn't bring her home. I don't even know her. I swear to you, Mom. Believe me, please." "Are you calling me a liar? You both were sleeping on the couch, and I told you to get dressed properly. What have I done wrong this time?" After my mom left, I felt so bad. I quickly stood up and ran to my room, where I didn't hesitate to cry as much as possible. Later on, I explained to my parents, and they realized that Bob had lied. However, I begged them not to talk about it to him, and they didn't. In his 3rd year of college, Bob began exhibiting even worse behaviors. He stopped returning home daily and only came on Saturdays. When my parents asked him, he lied that he was living with his friends. It was good for me because I didn't have to face his silly behaviors anymore. Soon, he added more. He would smoke at home whenever my parents were out and call me a weakling whenever I refused to join him. Once, our parents caught him smoking and drinking in the living room. I'd expected them to lash out at him or something, but they didn't. They only asked him to be careful and eat healthy food. I was quite surprised, but I let it slide. He was old enough. Years later, we were finally grown men, and I was married. My brother had gotten nearly completely out of control. He dropped out of college in his last year and left home to wherever. He suddenly came to my house one day. According to him, he was ready to turn a new leaf. I was impressed by how different he sounded, so I offered to help him. One time, about 2 weeks later, I had a fight with Bob. He'd come to visit me, yet he was trying to be all bossy, and that was annoying me. I tried to calmly ask him to stop, but he got mad. "What? Are you telling me how to behave? I'm 2 years older than you, so I can do whatever I want." There he went with the age gap thing again. I couldn't take it anymore. "Until when are you going to keep mentioning this? You're 2 years older than me. Yes, now act like it." We kept going back and forth until Bob left my house in pure anger. When my wife returned home from work, we also got into a small fight. I went to bed that night with a hurt heart. After that one night, when my wife didn't spend the night with me due to our fight, things took a strangely different turn. Even after we settled our issue, she would return home very late in the night, far beyond her usual time. My brother and I hadn't settled our fight, but he would often come over to my house, have little conversations with me while giving me silly smirks. About 3 months later, my wife suddenly announced her pregnancy. I frowned. How was she pregnant when we hadn't had sex in 3 months? I tried to push it aside, but it kept bothering me. I faked happiness when she gave me the news, but I knew the pregnancy wasn't mine. She had cheated on me. I managed to hold it in until her 6th month of being pregnant. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to confront her. She tried to deny it at first, but when I yelled at her, she was forced to start talking. She burst into tears and went on her knees. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Joe. Forgive me, please. It wasn't intentional." Of course, I was touched by her tears. I couldn't bear to see her crying, but I also needed to know who she cheated on me with and why she did it. When I asked her, she only cried more, her body trembling uncontrollably. "Tell me, who is it?" "It's your brother." It felt like my world stopped for a moment. I couldn't believe my ears. How could Bob be responsible for my wife's pregnancy? It's not possible. You're joking with me. I'm not, Joe. He's responsible for this. She further explained that she had run into Bob that night we fought. They'd gone to his house together, and things progressed from there. And it wasn't just that day. They were dating. My brother had impregnated my wife and was also dating her. I broke into a sob. I was heartbroken. I wanted nothing more than for all of that to be a nightmare. I wanted to wake up, but I couldn't because it was all real. I cried until my eyes and throat began to hurt. I cried until my eyes refused to form tears anymore. I'd never felt so hurt. I sent my wife out. I felt disgusted just staring at her. Once she left, I rushed over to my parents and broke down again in front of them. When they heard about what happened, they were shocked. They hadn't seen Bob since he left home and were devastated to hear what he did when I was only trying to help him. It hurt so badly because Bob and my wife weren't strangers to each other. I was even more sad to think that my wife could probably be with Bob as we spoke. After crying over it for days, I decided to divorce her. Bob showed up with her at my parents' house, and they both told us they weren't going to stop dating. In anger, my parents cussed at my wife and disowned Bob. They both didn't seem to care and left us. My wife signed the divorce papers without even thinking twice, and I was left alone with nothing but my parents and my shattered heart. I didn't hear from them until about 6 years later, after my parents had died. Both my parents had left behind a good inheritance for me, which promised wealth for generations. I had also found a new lady I was talking to. She comforted me in every way possible and guided me whenever I needed guidance. One day, we were both going out when I suddenly saw Bob and my ex-wife standing outside my gate. I stopped my car and stepped out. They immediately rushed to me and went on their knees. "Help us, Joe. Please forgive us and help." Apparently, both Bob and my ex-wife had been diagnosed with cancer. Bob lost his job a month ago, while my ex-wife had stopped working 6 months earlier after the doctor warned her against doing anything stressful. They were both living from hand to mouth and couldn't afford their surgeries. They were begging for my help. I burst into laughter. "After what you both did to me, I'm very surprised to see you in this condition." "Joe, please," they pleaded. "We're going to die if you don't help us. Please, our son was born paralyzed. No one is going to help him if we don't. Please, Joe." Karma had truly dealt with them. I smiled happily. "I have no help to render to you both. Not now. Not ever. You both didn't care about my feelings when you hurt me, so I don't care about your paralyzed child. When you die, I'll make sure to attend your funerals, though dressed in red. Oh, that's if anyone would be kind enough to give you both proper burials." I walked back to my car, ignoring their cries and pleas. They deserved it and more. Not in a million years would I help them. Never. 6 months later, I heard rumors that Bob had died and was buried, while his wife was in critical condition at the hospital. As for their paralyzed child, he was given up for adoption since their illness had become so serious. As for me, well, I later got married to Jennifer, and she is pregnant. I'm so happy. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below.
Hi, I'm Tyler. Living with my dad and stepmom Janet, along with her 2 kids, was never easy. But in the beginning, things were at least tolerable. Dad remarried 2 years ago, and at first, Janet seemed fine, distant, but fair. However, it didn't take long for the differences in how she treated her kids and me to become glaringly obvious. It started small. At dinner, her kids would get generous servings, while I'd often be left with what felt like scraps. "Tyler, you're growing too fast. We need to watch your diet," Janet would say, forcing a strained smile. I brushed it off, thinking maybe she had a point. But as Dad started working longer hours, Janet's control over the household tightened, especially over me. One afternoon, I came home starving, dropped my backpack by the sofa, and headed for the kitchen. But Janet was already there, blocking the fridge. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked sharply. "Just grabbing a snack," I replied, trying to keep my tone calm. "I'm starving." Her response was dismissive, her eyes not even meeting mine. "Snacks are for the kids. They have swim practice. You can wait for dinner." As the days turned into weeks, a knot formed in my stomach, not just from hunger, but from the realization that this was my life now. My room became my only sanctuary from her icy stares and suffocating rules. But even there, I couldn't escape the growing sense of isolation. One rare evening, when Dad was home, I tried to talk to him. "Dad, things are different when you're not here. I don't think Janet likes me very much." He barely looked up from his work. "Tyler, Janet's doing her best. Just give it time. Things will get better." But they didn't. He couldn't see what I saw or hear the sharpness in her words. Feeling more alone than ever, I retreated back to my room, listening to the sound of their laughter echo down the hall. Lying on my bed, I wondered how long I could endure this. The hunger was no longer just physical. It gnawed at my heart too, for the warmth and love that had once filled our home before Janet arrived. Things took a darker turn when Janet installed locks on the fridge and pantry. It wasn't gradual. One morning, the kitchen was just off limits unless Janet said otherwise. "You need to earn your meals from now on," she'd announce, standing in front of the closed kitchen door. "I can't have you taking whatever you want. You'll do extra chores, mow the lawn, wash the cars, clean the garage, or you can give up your allowance." Her kids sat silently eating their breakfast as I stood there, unsure of how to even begin earning something as basic as food. That first week, I worked until I could barely stand. I mowed the lawn until my hands blistered, scrubbed the cars until they sparkled, and organized the garage so meticulously you could eat off the floor. But when I asked for food, Janet would just gesture toward a tiny plate, a meal so small, it hardly lasted me a few hours. I started hiding bits of food whenever I could, crackers, apples, anything that wouldn't spoil too quickly. I stashed it in my backpack, under my bed, inside old shoe boxes. But no matter how hard I tried, it was never enough. My clothes started hanging off me and I couldn't focus at school. My grades, once a source of pride, began slipping. "Tyler, are you okay?" My teacher, Mrs. Jensen, asked me after class one day when I flunked a test I should have aced. "Yeah, I'm fine," I lied, avoiding her gaze. I wasn't ready to admit how bad things had gotten. Not even to myself. At home, every mealtime became a battleground. Janet's rules grew harsher, and my attempts to meet her demands became increasingly desperate. "You didn't finish washing the windows." "No dinner tonight," she announced one evening, her words slicing through the air. That night, lying in bed, my stomach ached, not just from hunger, but from the emotional weight of living in a home where I had to earn the right to eat. The loneliness was suffocating, my thoughts swirling in a storm of frustration and despair. Each morning, I woke up exhausted, dreading the day ahead. School offered no escape as my declining grades began to draw unwanted attention. "Tyler, you need to apply yourself more," a teacher commented one day, handing me back another test marked in red. But how could I explain that it wasn't a lack of interest, but a lack of food that was dragging my grades down? Every day felt heavier than the last, the weight of my situation pressing down on me until it felt unbearable. Janet's house no longer felt like a home, it was a prison. I found myself counting down the days until I could escape somehow. The weeks blurred into one long stretch of exhaustion and hunger, and then everything changed during what felt like the hardest week of my life. I was slumped over my desk in history class, trying to stay awake and focus, when Mrs. Jensen, my teacher, paused mid-sentence and walked over to me. Her sudden presence snapped me out of my daze. "Tyler, can you stay after class for a moment?" she asked softly, her voice filled with a concern I hadn't heard from anyone in a long time. When the bell rang, my classmates rushed out, but I stayed behind, dreading the conversation I knew was coming. "Tyler, I've noticed you've been really tired lately and your grades have dropped a lot. Is everything okay at home?" Mrs. Jensen's eyes searched mine, her tone gentle but serious. The concern in her voice broke down the wall I'd been holding up for so long. I tried to give her a simple excuse, something that would keep everything hidden. But the words felt hollow. "It's nothing. I just haven't been sleeping well." She sat down next to me, her expression becoming more serious. "Tyler, if something is going on, you can tell me. It's important." That's when everything came pouring out. I told her about the locks on the fridge and pantry, the ration meals, the endless chores, and the way Janet treated me compared to her own kids. Mrs. Jensen listened to every word, her face growing more concerned with each detail. The very next day, Mrs. Jensen made a call to Child Protective Services, CPS. Within hours, a social worker arrived at school to speak with me. I shared my story again, showing them the faint bruises from the physical strain of the chores and the toll my malnourishment had taken on my body. CPS acted quickly. Later that day, while I was still at school, they paid a visit to my home. I heard about what happened after. Janet was caught completely off guard. Her usual calm, calculating demeanor gave way to defensive anger as she tried to brush off the accusations. "This is nonsense. He's just a lazy boy making up stories because he doesn't want to do his chores," she snapped at the social worker. But the evidence spoke louder than her words. The locks on the fridge and pantry, my near-empty bedroom with hidden stashes of food, and my appearance told a story that was hard to deny. When my dad was called home from work, he was shocked. At first, he couldn't believe it, but as the facts sank in, his disbelief turned to horror. "I had no idea," he whispered, his voice breaking as he looked at me, not just as his son, but as a victim of the woman he had trusted. The betrayal hit him hard. CPS facilitated a tense family meeting where everything was laid bare. Janet's actions, the evidence, and my struggles were out in the open. My dad was torn, devastated by the choice he now had to make between his wife and his son. But in the end, the truth was undeniable. He made the decision to remove Janet from our lives. Divorce proceedings began soon after, and Janet was forced to move out. My dad was overwhelmed with guilt and emotional turmoil, realizing how blind he had been to what was happening under his own roof. He was racked with guilt for not seeing the signs earlier, for letting his work blind him to the reality of our home life. We moved out of the house, taking temporary refuge in a small apartment while we navigated the legal and emotional fallout. One evening, as we sat in our new living room, much smaller and humbler than what we were used to, Dad turned to me, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry, Tyler. I should have been there for you. We'll get through this together." His words, though heavy with regret, held a promise. The hope of healing felt like a faint light at the end of a very dark tunnel. But for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were finally free from Janet's control, and though the road ahead was uncertain, it was one we would walk together. We started family therapy in the second week at our new place. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Ellis, had a gentle way of drawing out the words we had been too afraid to say. "It's about rebuilding trust," she told us during one session. "Trust in each other and in yourselves." In therapy, we unpacked everything. I talked about the hunger, the loneliness, and the desperation, while Dad shared his guilt and struggle to balance work with family. It was painful, revisiting those dark moments, but with each session, it felt like we were slowly mending something that had been broken for a long time. Gradually, life began to take on a new rhythm. I re-enrolled in school, and with regular meals and less stress, my health improved. My grades climbed back up, and my teachers noticed the change. Mrs. Jensen even stopped by one day with a stack of books she thought I'd enjoy. "Just a little fuel for that brilliant mind of yours," she said with a wink. Dad also made changes. He cut back his work hours to be more present at home. We started cooking together, stumbling through recipes and laughing at our kitchen disasters. In those little moments, I began to see the father I had missed during the hardest times. We also started a new tradition, Sunday walks in the park, just the two of us. Sometimes we walked in silence, sometimes we talked about everything and nothing. It was during one of those walks that Dad stopped, looked me in the eyes, and said, "Tyler, I know I can't change the past, but I promise you this, I will never let you go through anything like that again. We're in this together." It wasn't an instant fix. Some days were harder than others, and the shadows of the past would sometimes creep in, chilling the space between us. But we faced them together, a father and his son, rebuilding the bridges that had almost burned down. Looking ahead, I know there are still challenges to face and wounds to heal. But for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. I believe in the possibility of a future where the pain of the past is just a memory, a lesson learned on the path to becoming stronger. As I share this story, I hope it reaches someone who needs to hear it. You're not alone, and there's always a path to healing, no matter how broken the road might seem. Thanks for listening. If this touched you, or you know someone who might benefit from hearing it, please like and subscribe for more stories like this.